Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we have enough attendees. I appreciate everyone joining. Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to join our webinar today. We are excited to have you. My name is Rainey Belts. I'm on the Strategic Alliances team for CoreStack, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. We've got a couple of housekeeping notes. So first off, this will be recorded and sent out to you after, along with the slides. We do want you to be interactive. We will have some poll questions. So I suggest you answer those and be interactive as possible. We will have Q&A at the end of the session. So go ahead and feel free to put anything in the chat, but everything will be addressed at the end. Today for our webinar, our speakers include Marina Novikova. She is an AWS Solutions Architect for AWS startups. So we appreciate her being here. We have Ritesh Patel. He is the VP of Products for Nirmata, and we have Venkatesh Perumal for CoreStack, and he is the field CTO. We have put all their contact information so that when we send out the slides, feel free to reach out to them. Let's go for it. Today, we'll be talking about Amazon EKS, Kubernetes, cloud governance and compliance, and kind of how they all work together. Our first poll question of the day is, are you using EKS today? Yes, no, but plan to use in the future. So we will give everyone about 20 to 30 seconds to answer, and then we'll launch the poll now and talk about it after. I think we've given everybody enough time. Let's go ahead and launch the results. Awesome. Marina, do you find this answer, like the top answer, surprising, yes or no, and can you elaborate for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised to see only 43% are using EKS yet, because containers became a must-have part of any application. But yeah, let's see. Let's dive in. Let's see what the challenges people are facing, and probably we will resolve some of them today and help you to move forward and make your processes efficient and be easy with containers in the future. Thank you, Randy. My name is Marina Novikova. I'm Partner Solution Architect at AWS. And at my role, I work with our partners to do technical validation, design technical integrations, to make our partner platform as rich as possible and provide the best capabilities for our customers. So today, I'll dive a little deep where we are nowadays with cloud-native technologies, with the containers. We'll talk about security at AWS, what the challenges, what the keys to success, and then we'll move to my co-presenter from Nirmata and CoreStack. So if you know, and I'm pretty sure you're very well informed that for the last 30 years, the era of architecture and transform it completely different, from monoliths to the complex distributed systems and microservices architecture. In most of the cases, microservice architecture right now runs on containers. Containers provide a lot of benefits. I'm pretty sure about that, a lot of flexibility. You don't want to manage anymore your instances unless it's specific cases. With AWS coming to the place which allows experiment scale, you can spin up as many containers as needed. So it's not anymore the problem to design your architecture the way where the services has their own responsibility. So as many services as you need, as many containers, clusters, nodes as you need. The chaos technologies allows us also define infrastructure and resources by engineering team. We're using infrastructure as a code or GitOps approach, and we are going to the era of the everything is code when you define resources, application code, configuration, everything in a Git. And the speed and agility of developing and releasing new applications and features are becoming the keys of SecOps organization. Organization wanted to decrease the time to the market and release their product as fast as they can. So what are the challenges coming with this cloud native era? First of all is security, compliance, observability, monitoring of the complex distributed system. I'm pretty sure everyone wanted to have this single lens of the view, the single lens of the pane, the glass, when you come to the dashboard and you can monitor every single part of your running applications and every infrastructure you have. The second one is with unleashed power of the cloud to experiment and scale, you still wanted to keep the cost management under control. You wanted to know what kind of resources to use it, not use it, if they have been chosen appropriately to the task or workload. Then nowadays, they see completely involved responsibility of the teams. The previous IT and security versus the nowadays DevOps and engineering teams, they all need new tools to collaborate and gain this operation excellence and the efficiency of the processes to keep the pace of the releases coming up to the market. So there is multiple different aspects, and today we will concentrate a little bit about security, compliance, and the governance. Next slide, please. So I want to talk specifically first about what is security at AWS. At AWS, we call it a shared responsibility model. The shared model can help relieve some of the customer's operation burden as AWS operates, manages, control the components from the host operating system, virtual layer, and to the physical security of the facilities in which the service operates. So AWS is responsible for protecting the infrastructure that runs all the services offered in AWS cloud. And this infrastructure is composed of the hardware in different regions and availability zone and software, including networking, database compute. So it's not only facilities, but also like provide the security of the software running on the top of our hardware. But looking at that, there is a customer responsibility, which is determined by the AWS cloud services that the customer selects. Most typically, we are talking about identity access manager roles for both like teams, users, cross services, and cross account access. We are talking about configuring network and inbound, outbound rules, what allowed it, which traffic allowed. We're talking about data encryption, in transit and rest, and more. Next slide, please. So how it all like lay down into the Kubernetes in the cloud. So with EKS, AWS is responsible for managing EKS EKS managed Kubernetes control plane. This includes Kubernetes API server, controller manager, scheduler, the etcd database, key value database, or other infrastructure necessary for AWS to make sure that we deliver secure, reliable service. As a consumer of EKS, you're largely responsible for managing IAM users and roles and identity resource-based policies, defining the first node and pod security, runtime security, network security, configuring secrets encryption. So looking at the application running in the cloud, it's a different aspect where you have to like apply best practices, and it includes security configuration of the data plane, including the configuration of the security group that allow traffic to pass from Amazon EKS plane into the customer VPC to communicate with other services, the configuration of the node itself and container themselves, the node's operating system, including updating security patches, other associated application software, setting up, managing network control such as the firewall rules, managing platform level identity, both in IAM and going outside of IAM. And you're also responsible for sensitivity of your data, your company requirements to the data, and applicable laws and regulations. So when it comes to infrastructure security, AWS will assume additional responsibility as you move from self-managed workers to managed node groups to Fargate. For example, with Fargate, AWS become responsible for securing the underlying infrastructure, underlying instance and runtime used to run your pods. AWS will also assume responsibility of keeping the EKS optimized EMI up to date with Kubernetes patch version security patches. Customer use and managed node groups, which also have like different use cases when you wanted to have a self-managed workers, will be responsible for upgrading their node groups to the latest AMI using EKS API or CLI or CloudFormation or different partner integrated solution. So you also can use CIS Amazon EKS benchmark in conjunction with EKS best practices guide for security, configure Amazon EKS according to this recommendation. So there is a multiple different aspects, what you need to configure, what you need to manage access to, and like applying the different security rules, what is allowed inside of your organization. Next slide, please. So how to succeed with all of this, right? What a different aspect of to be successful, and what kind of processes we need to have in our organization. First of all, I wanted to reference the V model. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the V model in application development. You cannot afford a big mistake happening in the beginning of design. So I cannot stress enough using well-architectured review, for example, to run your system design in the beginning of the cloud, to run for different pillars and validate that you like properly design it concept and the infrastructure inside of the cloud. Then we're coming to when we're talking about what is allowed nowadays and about seeing the shift from the left to the right, the security and compliance can be done on early stage too. With DevOps and GitOps approaches, everything is as code is possible nowadays. You can put the configuration and validation into the pipeline. You can apply OPA, guardrails, and vulnerability scanning while it's still sitting in your Reaper. Or you can do drift detection to make sure there's no manual errors in your environments. Enforce both compliance rules like HIPAA, FedRAMP, or other organization policies required by your workloads. Can include the need of logging and audits. Can include, for example, the simple rule like disabling public S3 buckets. So it's all possible, and I cannot stress enough to automate all of this. We need CI/CD, we need GitOps approaches to decrease operational overhead, to decrease the manual errors, the risk of manual errors, and to make sure as soon as you design it, as soon as you like put the code into immutable state in the version control system, it can be like easily deployed to any environment propagated. The next is going to be permissions management framework. You need to enforce the minimum permission needed policies and manage permissions for both services and teams. For example, controlling access to AWS resources using tagging approach. We talked about runtime security automation and about runtime updates for self-managed nodes. You want some services we can notify you and help you with this automation. Nowadays, we have anomalies detection. We have AI and ML services which help detect any different, like any behavior which is not typical for your infrastructure and resources, and we have intelligent threat detection. And of course, you wanted to monitor the cost and be notified as soon as the resources is not used or resources like not taken every like CPU or any other storage you like provided for the workload. So to summarize all of this is, as part of designing any system, you need to think about its security implications and the practices that can affect your security posture. For example, you need to control who can perform actions against a set of resources too. You also need the ability to quickly identify security incidents, protect your systems and services from unauthorized access, and maintain the confidentiality, integrity of the data for data protection. Having a well-defined and rehearsed set of processes for responding to security incidents will improve your security posture too. So you want all these tools integrated with your incident system like Jira or something else. These tools and techniques are important because they support objectives such as preventing financial loss and comply with regulatory obligations for your company. AWS help organizations achieve their security and compliance goals by offering rich set of the services which lay down in the foundation of their business processes that have evolved based on the feedback from our customer and the partners. You can see some of them examples on the screen right now, but that's not all. So how to gain all of these practices, policies, how to have this single pane of glass. This is where our partners come to play. AWS provides a really good foundation, but we can start we support our partners to develop this rich platforms where you can simplify your processes and operations of your companies. And this is where Nirmata and CoreStack play a very important role. And I'm happy to move to our next co-presenter, Ritesh, to talk about what specifically can be done and how these partners can help us. Oh, we have a poll question. Yeah, Randy.
Thanks, Marina. I appreciate it. I'll go ahead and take the poll question over. This is poll question number 2. What are your top challenges if you are using EKS, pod security, automation, governance, compliance, cost management, or you're not using Amazon EKS? Once again, let's go ahead and launch the poll. I'll give you about 20 to 30 seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and launch the results from the poll. Thank you for that. Was that the answer you were expecting, Ritesh? Why or why not?
No, actually I was, and it's, if you can see, it's a little bit across all over the place, across the board. I mean, there's several challenges, and I'll get into that in my section, right? So yeah, I mean, I in the first poll question, there are a lot of folks who haven't jumped into EKS and started using Kubernetes. So just to level set, just briefly, I'll talk about Kubernetes and then jump into some of the challenges that we see and how we address those challenges, right? So Kubernetes is really becoming the new cloud OS, for cloud native applications, right? So really what it provides is at a high level container orchestration, which is needed if you're deploying applications or packaging applications in containers. Also, if you're using microservices, these applications need to microservices need to, find each other. There needs to be, traffic routing, things of that nature, where service discovery and load balancing is important. And Kubernetes provides that out of the box. Also, dynamic automated storage and network provisioning is another, the foundational service that Kubernetes provide. And the interesting thing is it's pluggable. So, you can leverage services from that are native on Amazon EKS, or you can leverage other storage networking services as needed from various partners. Now, when it comes to applications, there's several challenges around secrets management, configuration management, and Kubernetes has frameworks for that. So it's again these are native constructs which can be leveraged by your microservices applications. And then automation is a huge benefit, whether it's auto healing in case your services fail, or auto scaling to meet the demands of your users, right? So those are built-in capabilities, very configurable, and can be leveraged right out of the box. And then lastly, automated rollouts and rollbacks. And what's happening in Kubernetes is, as Marina mentioned, GitOps is becoming the de facto way to roll out applications, where your application description and definition is stored in Git, and you can then roll it out on one or more clusters as needed. So these are the foundational building blocks that Kubernetes provides out of the box. Let's go to the next slide. But as the adoption of Kubernetes increases, and as you saw in this the poll question, there are several challenges around securing and governing Kubernetes infrastructure, right? So one of the top challenges, according to this survey, it was a survey from State of Kubernetes in 2021. Applying policies across teams and clusters is a huge challenge. The next set of challenges are around securing containerized workloads at runtime, as well as securing container images. And then beyond that, there's challenges around cluster and application access, and as well as the distribution. So these are definitely something we see very commonly as we work with customers, and these tend to be very environment specific. So as you adopt Kubernetes and EKS, as well as some of the Kubernetes-based services, it's important to have a plan in place and solutions that can help you with these kind of challenges. So next slide. So what we found when we worked with customers on Kubernetes is that to scale, from, let's say, a single cluster, single app, single team to multiple clusters with deploying multiple applications and shared with multiple teams, you need a central way of managing Kubernetes security, compliance, and governance. And what that means is right from getting visibility into your clusters, your resources, your application health, to security, whether it's configuration security, runtime security, image security for your container images, and then automation. Kubernetes already has a lot of built-in constructs for automation, but then how do you leverage those constructs? Whether it's autoscalers or automated rollouts, along with your rest of your tool chain, and how do you enable things like self-service? So there's automation plays a key role, and automation, and we kind of bring put automation into the governance bucket, is because through automation you can ensure governance, right? So you can set up certain guardrails and make sure that your applications and your users are staying within those guardrails and boundaries. And now, as more and more applications move to Kubernetes, you have the same compliance standards that you need to meet with your traditional applications, or if you were running these applications on a virtual machine, right? So whether these are your industry specific compliance standards, or standards like CIS or NIST, those become important depending on your vertical. And all of this to move quickly with Kubernetes and with cloud native applications, as teams are looking for agility, having the collaboration in place, having that kind of not just that single pane of glass, but the ability to leverage DevOps tools to collaborate between teams to make sure the entire organization is moving quickly and has the agility, right? So those are the key pillars, and the way we envision this and what we've seen is, a lot of these can be enabled through Kubernetes native policies. So at Nirmata, we have open sourced a policy engine called Kverno, which is becoming a foundational building block for Kubernetes, compliance and security compliance and governance. And it helps with all of these various, requirements across your entire pipeline, from, build to deploy to run, right? So that's kind of what, we've seen and how we've addressed these challenges. So, when you talk about policies and policy management, here we kind of just double click into how policies can help across these different pillars, right? So right from automation, where you can, even basic things like, labeling your resources, setting up defaults, to enabling secure self-service. We have native integrations into open source projects like Carpenter, which is from AWS for dynamic scaling of nodes. So that level of automation helps with cost management. On the security side, at the very minimum, every Kubernetes cluster needs to follow the pod security standards, which are laid out by CNCF. But then it goes beyond that to multi-tenancy, supply chain security, and then in case of AWS, more specific configuration around configuring IAM roles for service account. A lot of those can be automated through policies. On compliance, leveraging these policies to enforce certain compliance standards like CIS and NIST, as well as in the industry-specific standards is another benefit. And then on the governance side, we talked about briefly enforcing best practices, injecting certificates through sidecars, as well as ensuring specific configurations in case of cloud resources like load balances and others, like making sure they're not public, and then having approvals in place to make sure if any exceptions are needed in the configuration. So policies have a very broad set of applications, and we see these across the users of Kverno in the community, as well as across our customers. Next slide. So on the foundational layer of Kverno, what we as Nirmata, what we provide is a comprehensive solution for Kubernetes governance, security, and compliance, and it's called Nirmata Policy Manager. It works with all the flavors of EKS, whether it's the EKS service or EKS distro, as well as more recently we announced support with EKS Anywhere. And this Nirmata Policy Manager can be used to manage the life cycle of the Kverno policy engine itself, but more importantly, configuring your policies across your fleet of clusters, and then collecting any policy violations and making them visible to your teams, so that they get addressed, right? And then beyond that, the policy manager can map policy violations to various compliance standards, as well as it integrates with tools like Jira, Git, and Slack to enable the DevSecOps automation. So with policy manager and kind of leveraging that with EKS, whether it's on cloud or on-prem, you get that single view or single pane of glass for your security, governance, compliance needs. In the next slide. So I think that's my next. After the poll question, Venki will talk about CoreStack.
Thanks, Ritesh. I appreciate it. This brings us to poll question number 3. Are your customers asking about cloud governance and compliance? Yes, majority of customers. Yes, very few, or not at all. Once again, I'll give you 20 to 30 seconds, and then we'll launch the results. Let's go ahead and launch the results. Thank you. Venki, what are your thoughts on the results of the poll?
Wow. I mean, glad to see the result coming up, and everyone saying, of course, majority of the customers are looking at governance today, and primarily because, and it's not surprising. The reason is, I think everyone knew the version 1 of cloud adoption was done mostly from management perspective, and now the entire narrative has changed that, hey, management is good, but I think governance is even more important, because soon everybody is getting out of control. And if you have to bring any aspect of cloud into control, it's important to have cloud governance put in place, right? And that's what I see, and all the customers that we speak about. But certainly good to see that everyone is looking for, their number one priority is cloud governance. Let's move on to the next slide. So where does CoreStack really fit in here, right? CoreStack is a cloud governance and management platform. As I said, our core way of looking at adoption of cloud itself is more from a governance perspective, because once you have control, it becomes much more easy for you to go ahead and manage it. As Marina, initially spoke about various services in AWS, which you can consume to get the benefit of each and every services, specifically for EKS, and Nirmata bringing in the Kverno policy, what best could be if we are able to use best of these services from Nirmata, best of the services from the native cloud service providers, and provide you a much more enhanced way of governing your infrastructure, primarily, let's say EKS, right? But when you look at governance itself, more is you need to look at not only from a security perspective, you also have to look at it from an operations, cost, and of course, security is one aspect to it. And as Ritesh was mentioning about, hey, when you go ahead and provision a resource through GitOps or through the CI/CD pipeline, it is important to have that entire control baked into the overall process, right? And that's where the policy as code or governance as code really comes into the picture, where when you provision the resource, you are in a position to go ahead and apply certain security best practices before even it gets deployed, right? And if you're able to find any anomalies, security anomalies, even before the deployment happens, then you are pretty much addressing all of the security related issues right before it gets into the live environment, right? So that's where CoreStack really comes into the picture, where we go ahead and chain together all these activities, all these services, and provides you end-to-end governance and compliance. As we move to the next slide, let's look at only from a security perspective, what are the key ingredients that you would require when you are managing EKS. But more importantly, AWS provides not only EKS, but there are also other services which are there. So how can you have one unified cloud security posture management? And I always tell that the foundation of every aspect of the cloud is, your inventory visibility. If it is not visible, you're pretty much not governing or managing them well, right? And the second is, for each and every industry, right, the requirement of compliance varies. For financial services industry, if they are consuming EKS, their requirement of having that secured versus a manufacturing industry will be totally different, right? The financial services industry would look for, hey, can I make sure that all of my EKS workloads are compliant with PCI DSS or ISO 27701? How can I make sure that on a continuous basis I'm able to run the assessment? But more importantly, I'm able to get that overall security posture, which will provide you what is your risk exposure, right? But then look at this way, that the cloud technology changes every day. Now, how do we make sure that we also catch up to those changes that are happening? And that can only happen if you have what I call as policy enforcement or policy-driven governance and compliance. Because if you're able to configure it at the speed of how the technology moves, the policy can really become an accelerator for you to go ahead and run these compliance assessment and security posture on a continuous basis, and you're not waiting for 3 months and 6 months to pretty much build an API to go ahead and look at how security posture looks like. Policy is very, very key, which can help you do two things. One, you can be proactive and you can also be reactive, right? Both aspects of security is very, very important, primarily because once it is into the environment, it also goes through a change. And we want to make sure that any drift that occurs as part of that change, policy is able to quickly go grab and provide you that recommendation of, hey, what you need to do to fix that drift. Now, when we look at implementing this entire security posture into an enterprise environment, you also have to make sure that it integrates with various other tools, right? It could be a SIEM tool, it could be an ITSM integration to make sure that every violation that comes in, it automatically triggers an incident ticket and automatically also triggers a change management process so that you're able to take action in a much more faster way and align to the change management process of your own organization. Moving on to the next slide, let's look at double click on how does this compliance framework really works, right? We know that there are hundreds of compliance standards right out there in the industry, but for each industry, when you look at standards, within the standards, you have what you call as control objectives, right? Each and every control objective essentially is kind of a checklist. What CoreStack has done is each and every checklist has been categorized, whether it is a manual checklist or whether it is a technical checklist. If it is a technical checklist, we automatically map the policies. Now, Kverno policy is another one that we map for EKS. Now, once it gets mapped, and then you are in a position to configure your compliance assessment to run on a continuous basis. And why I'm using the phrase continuous is because compliance is no more a checklist. It is something which needs to happen every day or probably every hour to make sure that the drifts are identified much ahead of time rather than waiting for 6 months where you're already exposed to a lot of risks, right? And once you have you have an ability to do that, you are always compliant and you're not spending hours and hours of manual work to go ahead and see where the anomalies are, where the violations are, to go ahead and fix it. And that's the automation framework completely that CoreStack brings in. Moving on to the next slide. These are the various standards that we support, but that being said, you also have an ability to go ahead and build your own standard. We understand that, there are some regulatory standard, but there are also best practices benchmarks, for example, CIS, right? So as an organization, if you are looking at adopting any service within cloud, right, and you want to make sure that the security best practices is being applied, you have an ability to take best of NIST, best of ISO, best of PCI, and make sure that it is your own best practices, security practices, and you are able to go ahead and run assessment based on the framework that we showed earlier. Next slide. Yeah, so what are the key takeaways? Randy?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vidki. I appreciate it. That was awesome. So our key takeaways today are security compliance and governance are multi-agile processes and shared responsibility of AWS and their customers. GitOps, everything is code. CI/CD are keys for agile engineering processes in cloud. Proper governance strategy helps to drive efficiency across all pillars of the cloud. Kubernetes native policies and policies as code is the modern tool which helps to govern all aspects. And last but not least, achieving compliance does not need to be a burden anymore. Next slide. So our call to action, we encourage you to take a look at these links provided, follow up with our speakers if needed, and request a demo. Next slide. Here are some useful links to take a look at after the webinar is over. We have some links to check out there. We have questions. We're going to have Q&A right now. I'm going to take the top 3 questions and then we'll address everything after the webinar. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll give everybody a minute and then I'll start Q&A. Okay, it looks like I have some questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and get started there. This one looks like it's for Venki. What is a customer's main priority when it comes to governance? Is it operational excellence, security, cost, performance, reliability, or sustainability?
A good question. And actually, in the past, governance was always looked at as security, right? But the things have changed now. So when you're looking at any workload, you're pretty much looking at 360 degree, right? You're looking at every aspect of the workload from a governance perspective. So when I say governance, it's no more security. It also includes operations. It includes reliability. It includes performance. It includes security, and it includes cost, right? So from a priority standpoint, if you look at it, right from the workload, it's everything. But once you are set up in the right way, it becomes much more easy for you to go ahead and manage. So today, it's spread across all those key 5 pillars, primarily because in the last couple of years, if you look at it, AWS has also released what they call, they've been having the well-architected reviews, and it has pretty much the same kind of pillars that the question which has been asked. And that's where we are driving towards. So every customer is now looking at workload in all the 5 dimensions. And the 6th one is, of course, sustainability.
Awesome. Thank you, Venki. It looks like our next question is for you, Marina. What are the top few tools and practices you would highlight to run container workloads efficiently?
I think, I have a raised hand. So as I mentioned it, I would vote for GitOps. GitOps together with CI/CD to make sure you control everything even before it's deployed to any environment. You can run a lot of validation inside of the Reaper right now, and I would enforce companies to, I would ask companies to implement that to make sure they catch everything in the very beginning stage. So GitOps shifts everything to the left and catch everything in the beginning, implement guardrails, and do not allow a code to go to any environment unless it runs for all validations.
Awesome. Thank you, Marina. We have a couple more questions coming in. This one is for you, Ritesh. if I'm using security tools for Kubernetes, do I still need governance?
Yeah, so just kind of like, Venki mentioned, right? Governance is broader than just security. Now, some of the security tools are very kind of focused on, let's say, like runtime security or maybe image scanning. But then with Kubernetes, again, there's security challenges around, things like, misconfigurations or not configuring your workloads properly, and you need to be able to address them. Also, an emerging area is supply chain security, right? So there's, I guess, governance goes beyond security, and like I also highlighted some of the use cases around automation, which really becomes important as you're if you want to move quickly and you want to enable self-service. Automation is a key aspect of it. So it's not either or. I think you just have to make sure that you're covering all of the different aspects with your tool set.
Awesome. Thanks, Ritesh. Any more questions? I'll give a couple more seconds. I know someone raised their hand.
Yeah, I think Matt Nalinder raised the hand. Do you want to just go ahead and type your question on the Q&A, Matt?
Okay, we'll follow up with him via email. So we'll reach out to you separately after the webinar. I want to thank everybody for coming to our webinar today, especially our awesome speakers out there. Thank you so much for the talk. We will go for it.
Yeah,
Maria.
we actually have one more question. Does Nirmata support deferred IRR in Kubernetes?
So yeah, I don't believe we do today, but we're looking at supporting some of the related constructs. But at this point, we don't know.
Awesome. And it looks like we have one more question that just came in too. FedRAMP CoreStack is not ATO. Can you discuss, Venki, just really quick before we hop off?
Yeah, so what CoreStack as a platform, what we do is there are two things, right? One, help be it enterprise or ISVs where the products are there, the consuming services, to run the assessment against those FedRAMP controls. When it comes to CoreStack being certified for FedRAMP, there are two steps that CoreStack has taken. One, CoreStack is right now getting certified in what we call as Iron Bank repository. So it is going to be made available there, wherein it can be used within the federal. And the next step is essentially to get CoreStack itself certified on FedRAMP. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you, Venki. I appreciate everyone for coming today, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. We do have our speakers' information in the links that are provided, and we'll be sending out a recording as well. So thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.